Welcome to Inkwell Stories. Today we begin a motivational journey that is both inspiring and educational. Imagine a young man named Daniel, born in a small town where opportunities seemed to vanish before they even appeared. His family lived a modest life, always working hard but never having more than the bare minimum. Daniel often felt that success was something reserved for people born in big cities, with money, tutors, and connections. He had none of those. What he did have, however, was a quiet dream, to one day become an engineer and design something that could improve people's lives. Growing up, school wasn't kind to him. While some of his classmates excelled with ease, Daniel often struggled. Math was especially difficult. No matter how much he tried, numbers seemed to slip away from his grasp, like water through his fingers. After one particularly bad exam, he stared at the red marks on his paper and thought, maybe I am not cut out for this. Maybe my dream is too big. The fear of failure started to plant seeds of doubt in his mind, and for a while, he allowed those doubts to grow. Then, one day, something happened that would quietly change the course of his life. After class, his math teacher stopped him at the door. Instead of criticizing him, she said something unexpected. "Daniel, you don't have to be the smartest student in the room. Success is not about talent. It is about effort, about showing up every day and refusing to quit." Even 10 minutes a day, if repeated for years, can make the impossible possible. These words struck him like a spark landing on dry wood. For the first time, Daniel felt a strange sense of hope. If effort mattered more than talent, maybe he had a chance after all. That night, instead of lying in bed thinking about his failures, he made a decision. He picked up his notebook and promised himself that he would study math for at least 30 minutes every single day. No excuses, no waiting for the right mood, just disciplined effort. At first, it was painfully difficult. His mind wandered, he got frustrated, and he often wanted to quit. But he remembered his teacher's words, and he forced himself to continue. Slowly, something incredible happened. Concepts that once felt impossible started to make sense. Problems he once skipped began to look familiar. After weeks of consistency, he passed the test with a higher score than ever before. The improvement was small, but the confidence it gave him was massive. Encouraged by this progress, Daniel applied the same strategy to other parts of his life. He had always wanted to learn English but thought it was too hard. This time, he approached it differently. Instead of trying to memorize hundreds of words at once, he decided to learn just 10 words every evening. 10 words didn't seem like much, but after 1 year, he realized he had learned over 3,000. People around him noticed that he could now hold conversations in English, something they thought would never happen. It became clear to Daniel that success was not about sudden leaps, but about steady steps repeated daily. This transformation did not go unnoticed. His classmates, who once teased him for being the average student, began asking him for advice. Teachers who had doubted him started praising his persistence. Daniel himself felt stronger, not because he had suddenly become a genius, but because he had built something more powerful than talent: discipline. He learned that motivation is fleeting, but discipline builds habits, and habits shape destiny. For the first time in his life, Daniel began to believe in himself. His self-doubt, while not gone entirely, no longer controlled him. He understood that failure was not the end. It was simply a step in the process of growth. Each mistake was a lesson, each setback a chance to improve. This shift in mindset, from seeing obstacles as threats to viewing them as opportunities, marked a turning point. He discovered what many call the growth mindset. It was the belief that abilities can be developed through effort, learning, and perseverance. But as Daniel's confidence grew, so did the challenges ahead. His high school years were coming to an end, and a new test loomed on the horizon: the university entrance exam. Everyone in town knew how difficult it was. Thousands of students competed for limited spots, and most of them came from wealthy families who could afford the best tutors and resources. Daniel had none of that. His family could not afford extra classes, and he knew he would be at a disadvantage. Still, he reminded himself of the progress he had already made. If daily effort had changed his grades, maybe it could also change his future. The exam would not only test his knowledge, it would test his willpower. Late at night, as he looked at his stack of preparation books, he felt both fear and determination. "This is my chance," he whispered to himself. "I have come this far, and I won't give up now." He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and promised himself that no matter how hard it became, he would face this challenge with the same persistence that had brought him this far. And so, the stage was set. Daniel had overcome self-doubt, discovered the power of discipline, and built a growth mindset. But the greatest trial of his young life was still ahead. The exam was coming, and with it, the opportunity to prove that perseverance truly can turn dreams into reality. As the university entrance exam drew closer, Daniel found himself under more pressure than ever before. He knew how much depended on this test: his future, his dreams, and even his family's hopes. But life had a way of testing him in ways he never expected. Around this time, his father lost his job at the factory. Money, which had always been scarce, suddenly became even tighter. Bills piled up, and the stress in the household grew heavier with each passing day. Daniel could see the worry on his parents' faces. His mother tried to reassure him, telling him to focus on his studies, but he couldn't ignore reality. With his father unemployed, Daniel felt guilty spending hours with his books while his family struggled. He took a part-time job in a small grocery store, stocking shelves and delivering goods to customers. The job was tiring, and by the time he came home at night, his body ached and his mind was exhausted. Balancing work and studies became almost impossible. Some nights, he fell asleep over his textbooks. His carefully built routine began to collapse, and self-doubt returned. "Maybe I'm asking too much of myself," he thought. "Maybe I should just find a regular job and stop chasing impossible dreams." The idea of giving up was tempting. After all, no one would blame him. But deep inside, the small fire his teacher had lit years ago was still burning. One evening, while he was closing the shop, Daniel ran into his old math teacher, the same one who had once told him that effort mattered more than talent. She noticed how tired he looked and asked how his studies were going. Unable to hold back, Daniel told her everything: the job, the exhaustion, the pressure, and the creeping thought of giving up. She listened carefully, then said, "Daniel, success is not about avoiding failure. It is about learning from it, adapting, and continuing anyway. Many great people faced far bigger challenges than you, and they still kept going. What matters is not how many times you fall, but how many times you stand up again." She reminded him of famous figures like Thomas Edison, who failed thousands of times before inventing the light bulb, and Oprah Winfrey, who faced rejection after rejection before becoming one of the most influential women in the world. These stories hit Daniel deeply. For the first time in weeks, he felt hope rise again. If others could face so much hardship and still succeed, maybe he could too. The next day, he reorganized his schedule. He kept his part-time job, but he carved out specific hours for study, even if it meant waking up earlier and cutting out distractions. He learned to manage his time with precision, short bursts of focused studying instead of endless hours of half-hearted reading. He discovered the importance of prioritization, focusing on the most important subjects first, breaking large tasks into smaller steps, and sticking to his plan no matter what. It wasn't easy. There were days when exhaustion nearly broke him. There were nights when he questioned whether it was all worth it. But then he would remember his teacher's words and the examples of others who had succeeded despite failure. Slowly, he started to feel stronger. His progress returned. His test scores and practice exams began to rise again, and with each improvement came renewed determination. Daniel also developed a new perspective, the idea that every obstacle was a lesson disguised as pain. Working at the grocery store taught him patience and responsibility. Balancing work and study taught him discipline and time management. Facing stress taught him resilience. Instead of seeing his circumstances as unfair, he started to see them as preparation for the future. The weeks turned into months, and soon the exam was only days away. The atmosphere in the town was tense as thousands of students prepared for the same test. Some had tutors, some had expensive books, but Daniel had something else. He had persistence, discipline, and a belief that effort, repeated day after day, could beat any advantage. On the night before the exam, Daniel sat at his desk with his books closed. He didn't want to cram at the last moment. Instead, he reflected on his journey. He remembered the boy who once thought he wasn't smart enough, the boy who nearly gave up after failing exams, the boy who doubted his worth. That boy had changed. He had become someone stronger, someone who understood that success was not about never failing, but about never quitting. He looked out the window at the stars, took a deep breath, and whispered, "I am ready." The next morning, as he walked into the exam hall, his heart pounded in his chest. Thousands of other students sat in silence, waiting for the test papers to be handed out. Daniel tightened his grip on his pen and thought of his family, his teacher, and every late night he had spent studying. This was his chance. This was the moment that could define his future. The papers landed on his desk. He opened the booklet, and for a moment, his mind went blank. Fear threatened to overwhelm him. But then he closed his eyes, took another deep breath, and reminded himself of everything he had learned: consistency, perseverance, and the power of believing in himself. Slowly, he began to write. The battle had begun, and Daniel was ready to fight for his dream. The exam hall was silent except for the scratching of pens against paper. Daniel forced himself to stay calm, focusing on one question at a time. Hours passed, and when the final bell rang, he set down his pen with trembling hands. Walking out of the building, he felt drained, uncertain, and full of doubt. He replayed the questions in his head, wondering whether he had done enough. For the next few weeks, waiting for the results felt like torture. Every night he lay awake imagining two futures, one where he had succeeded and another where he had failed. Finally, the day came. The results were posted online, and Daniel sat in front of the computer, his heart racing. His hands shook as he typed in his details. For a moment, the screen froze, and then the numbers appeared. He read them once, twice, 3 times. His score was higher than he had ever dreamed. He had made it. He had secured a place at the university. At first, he couldn't believe it. He stared at the screen in silence before tears welled up in his eyes. For years, people had doubted him, and sometimes he had doubted himself. But now, all the hours of effort, all the discipline, all the sacrifices had paid off. His parents hugged him with tears of joy. His father, who had struggled so much after losing his job, told him, "Son, you are proof that determination is stronger than circumstances." For Daniel, it wasn't just about getting into university. It was about proving that with perseverance and discipline, even a boy from a small town could chase big dreams. University life was not easy. In fact, the challenges only grew. The classes were harder, the competition was fiercer, and the city was overwhelming. Many students around him came from wealthy families, equipped with the best resources. At times, Daniel felt out of place. He often had to work part-time jobs to pay for books and living expenses. But instead of seeing this as a disadvantage, he used it as fuel. Every struggle reminded him that he was building strength. Slowly, Daniel began to stand out. His professors noticed his commitment and his ability to solve problems with creativity and persistence. He joined study groups, not only to improve himself, but also to help others who were struggling, just as he once had. His story spread across campus. The student who had risen from nothing, who had overcome endless challenges, and who refused to give up. Other students looked up to him as an example of resilience. Over the years, Daniel grew not just in knowledge, but in character. He learned that success was not about climbing quickly to the top, but about building a foundation so strong that no storm could shake it. He graduated with honors, something that had once seemed impossible. But for Daniel, graduation was not the end. It was only the beginning. After university, he pursued a career in engineering. His first projects were small, but his persistence and reputation quickly opened doors. He became known not only for his technical skills, but also for his leadership and resilience. People respected him because he embodied the very values he preached: consistency, discipline, and perseverance. Eventually, he worked on projects that improved the quality of life in small towns like the one he had grown up in. His dream of building something meaningful had finally come true. Looking back, Daniel realized that the greatest lesson was not the knowledge he gained from books, but the strength he built from challenges. He understood now that success is not a straight road. It is a journey filled with obstacles, failures, and doubts. What separates those who succeed from those who give up is the decision to keep moving forward, no matter how slow the progress. And so, his story became more than just his own. It became a message to anyone who felt too small, too weak, or too unprepared to reach their dreams. Daniel's life shouted a truth that everyone needs to hear. Success is not about where you start. It is about how much effort you are willing to give and how long you are willing to keep going. If you are listening to the story right now, remember Daniel's journey. Remember that discipline beats talent when talent refuses to work. Remember that every step forward, no matter how small, takes you closer to your goal. And remember that you too are capable of writing your own success story. Thank you for joining us on this journey. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more inspiring stories like this. Your own journey is just beginning, so take the first step today.